Fight has been a decade in the making, maybe even longer. And for the longest time, it felt as though it's never going to happen. And to my surprise, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it looks as though both of these men are serious about fighting each other, and we might actually get to see Amir Khan and Kell Brook square off against each other finally. But now I suppose the question is it too late? Do you still care? Is it still a big event? I'm going to try and answer some of those questions, but before I do, my name's Rahul J Chan. This is the Battle Camp. Thank you very much for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So when I initially heard that they'd agreed to fight each other and they were going around speaking to different promoters and broadcasters, try and see who can give them the best deal to stage this event, my initial reaction was like a spoilt child. I was a bit like, no, I don't want it now. It's too late. I don't want to see these guys fight anymore. You lot should have done this 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And that kind of prompted me to kind of look back in my own kind of database of boxing memories and think about different occasions where I felt, as a naive fan at the time, that they've got to fight each other now. They've got to do it. And I can think of 2 occasions where obviously I was wrong, but there was 2 occasions in the journey of both of these fighters where I thought they've got to fight each other now. They have to. It has to happen. Like, no other fight makes sense. And the first time was back kind of... So before Kell Brook became world champion, he was calling out Amir Khan incessantly. He was all over it. And Amir Khan always seemed to find different reasons or excuses to not fight Kell Brook. And then it kind of evolved from, oh, you ain't beat anyone, or you need to get a good win first. It evolved to, you got to win a world title, because once you win a world title, you're finally bringing something to the table, and you're finally proving that you're good enough to have the privilege of stepping into the ring to face me. And so Kell Brook went to America and he faced Sean Porter for the IBF welterweight title of the world, and he won. And that was back in August 2014, the 16th of August 2014. And I'm recording this on the 16th of August 2021, 7 years ago to the day, to this day. And at that point, I felt, right, the next fight's got to be Amir Khan. Kell Brook against Amir Khan has to be the next fight. He's done it now. He's won the world title. What you were asking him to do, he's delivered it. He's got a world title. You got to fight him now. And obviously it didn't happen. And then Amir Khan signed with Eddie Hearn, and I don't know exactly when that was in the timeline. Let's just say, for argument's sake, 2 or 3 years after that, Amir Khan finally signs with Eddie Hearn. And I felt, all right, well, he signed a 2 or 3 fight deal or something like that. I felt, okay, well, that's it then. So he'll have a couple of warm-up fights, or 1 warm-up fight, however the deal was structured, whether it's 2 or 3 or whatever. But the last fight will be a fight between Amir Khan and Kell Brook, and obviously it didn't happen. But in that process of me looking back at this fight and different occasions it didn't happen, and where they both were in their career in those times, it kind of still made me want to watch the fight even now. Like, I still want to see it. I'm still looking forward to both of these men fighting and being able to watch it. Like, I don't know if there's ever been a fight that hasn't happened in the sport of boxing that I've wanted to see more than Kell Brook against Amir Khan. Like, and that's just me, personal preference. I'm not talking about, whether these guys have ever been the best in their weight divisions, or I'm not saying that there's other fighters that aren't technically better than both of these men, that might have a more entertaining fight than both of these men. I'm talking just from my perspective as a fan of the sport, growing up in England. This is the fight that I've wanted to see the most. And now that we're on the cusp of them fighting each other, I kind of find it quite, like, just watching how different outlets are kind of reacting to the news, or kind of reacting to the possibility of them fighting. I kind of find it quite funny in some sort of ways, and I'll kind of explain what I mean. Now, clearly, Sky Sports and Matchroom Boxing are no longer in business together. And I feel as though if Matchroom and Sky Sports were in business together, this is definitely a fight that Sky Sports would be very interested in broadcasting. Now that that relationship isn't there, I feel as though it will show just how keen Sky Sports are in the pursuit of broadcasting boxing by how they manage this fight. Do they go after it? Do they want to broadcast it? Do they want the rights for it? Or will they just let it go? Will they let it go elsewhere? One thing that I would hate to happen if this fight did happen, and it happened on Triller, one of them kind of apps, one of them American type apps, because that would just defeat the whole purpose for me personally. Because one of the things you want to see is the build up in this country. You want to see these guys in a press conference. You want to see these guys in a full arena somewhere in the north of England. That's kind of part of the narrative of this fight for me. So I'd hate for them to go to America and fight in some random city, Kansas. Hey, we're fighting in Kansas City. Like that would just take away from the event, because this event was built on domestic rivalry. So for them to take it across the pond, that would be almost blasphemous in my humble opinion. But obviously, it feels as though the reason why both of these men are now ready to fight each other is they both realize that they're coming towards the end of their career, and this is the fight that's going to pay them the most. Which brings me nicely on to Eddie Hearn, because Eddie Hearn is a guy that has been very vocal about this fight, and I don't think it's something that he's been intentionally trying to talk about. It's just he's been asked about it so much by, you know, all the usual suspects, IFL, Boxing Social, Behind the Gloves, etc., etc. And he's been largely negative about the fight, and that surprised me, to be honest, because as I kind of went down memory lane, kind of recalling my own kind of favourite memories about boxing or being a fan of the sport of boxing, I'd have to say I think I've always watched boxing ever since I was a kid, but when I actually became fully invested in the sport, I'd have to say it was probably around the time George Groves fought James DeGale. That's kind of when I was like, oh, I have to watch this fight. Like I was like excited and like I just couldn't wait for that Saturday night to come. And when was that actually? Let me go and check. Let's go on James DeGale's Wikipedia page. Bear with me, because I need to kind of think this out. 2011. So that was back in 2011, right? So we're talking 10 years ago. And then my kind of love for the sport grew from that point. And I stayed up, for example, for the Sean Porter and Kell Brook fight. And I remember watching the James DeGale beat Darrell. And when was that? And when I'm on his page, that was in 2015. And I remember being so excited and full of pride when these guys went to America and became world champions. And obviously you had the George Groves and Carl Froch when George Groves got Cobra'd and all of those events. That was kind of the peak of my kind of interest when it comes to the sport of boxing. I'm not going to lie, over the last couple of years, that interest has waned a little bit. Like I don't really follow the sport as close as I did back then. And a lot of it's got to do with the fact that the stories and the narrative outside of the sport just don't interest me as much as they did then. And perhaps that has a little bit to do with the fact that I was slightly naive to the business of boxing, where I felt as though fights are going to get made and they just never did. And that kind of makes you think, oh, well, you know what? I'll just worry about it if and when it ever happens. I'll stop getting excited about promoters saying this and managers saying that and fighters saying this and broadcasters saying that. Do you know what I mean? But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is throughout this whole journey of me being a fan of the sport, I feel as though Kell Brook was one of the first top domestic prospects. I don't know whether prospect is the right word to describe him, but he was one of the top domestic kind of fighters to sign with Eddie Hearn. And he was there from the beginning of Eddie Hearn's journey as a promoter of the sport in Britain, which has now led him to be a promoter of the sport globally. And when quizzed about the fight, the way he plays down the fight and the way he talks about how it's just a money grab and it's not as big as it once was, etc., etc., etc. There's kind of two things that it makes me think of. One, if I feel as though he can't match an offer that Amir Khan and Kell Brook have got elsewhere, so now he's in a position of trying to devalue the fight because he knows he's not going to be the one promoting it. Or two, he's still got a bee in his bonnet with regards to Kell Brook, because Kell Brook and Eddie Hearn had quite a public falling out around the time Kell Brook fought how can I forget his name? Terence Crawford. And when was that? When did Kell Brook fight? Was that last year? I can't remember if it was in the times of COVID or not. My memory's all jumbled up. Yeah, 2020, November 2020. And I watched that live as well. I paid for it. But that's by the by. So it's one of those two things in my mind. But one thing that I have to say I disagree with is when Eddie Hearn stands in and says a bigger fight would be Amir Khan against Conor Benn. No, like, don't get me wrong, I would definitely 100%, if Amir Khan stepped in the ring against Conor Benn, I'd watch it. But I'd much sooner watch Kell Brook fight Amir Khan than Conor Benn. Going into a fight between Conor Benn and Amir Khan, the narrative would be, has Amir Khan still got enough? And is Conor Benn good enough? Because they're almost like two ships passing each other in the night. One guy just isn't as good as he once was, and the other guy is still on the ascent or descent. I don't know, but he's on his way up, which the posher way of trying to say it, and I messed it up. And then the fight between Kell Brook and Amir Khan, at least both of them just aren't what they used to be. So it's even, it's equal. And actually there's a little bit of nice kind of synergy. The fact that both of them have recently lost quite convincingly to Terence Crawford. I feel like there's a lot of kind of parallels in the career of Amir Khan and Kell Brook. And I feel like this would be a nice way for them to finish their career. And going back to Eddie Hearn devaluing the fight, one of the things that Eddie Hearn always talks about is how it's important for him as a promoter to watch the fighters that he promotes secure their financial futures. Yeah, winning a world title is great. Yeah, it's good to realise dreams. But the first priority should always be to secure your future financially. And that's precisely what these two are doing in the shape of Amir Khan and Kell Brook. And I know you've fallen out with Kell Brook, but just the journey that you've been on, and Kell Brook, I feel like, has been a big part of that journey on different occasions, you know. So like I said, one of the first kind of prominent domestic fighters that signed for him, the world title that he won against Sean Porter, stepping in there against Golovkin at short notice. I think the fight against Terence Crawford was at Sheffield United Stadium, if I'm not mistaken, a nice outdoor event. Like, there's been different milestones for both of you along the way. And I just feel like it's a little bit of that bitter promoter that you talk about, that Eddie Hearn talks about. Oh yeah, you know, all promoters get bitter in old age. And as soon as I start being like that, I'm going to get out of the game. And to me, it feels a little bit bitter, because if you're not going to, if you have no interest in staging the fight, if you don't think that you can drive value out of the fight and get subscribers to the zone, then don't just devalue the fight in public. Do you know what I mean? Let these guys get the bag, as they say. Let these guys go out there and secure a nice big number for themselves in their retirement fight. And going back to subscribers for DAZN, I don't know if there is a fight, obviously, apart from Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. I don't know if there is a fight between two British fighters that Eddie Hearn can make to broadcast on DAZN that will bring in as many subscribers as a Kell, Brook and Amir, even to this day. I honestly can't think of a fight where it will grab the attention of the general public as well as the boxing hardcores, which I don't really count myself as one because I just don't fucking think about the sport and wank over it all day long. But I'd consider myself a very big fan of the sport, right? And I can't think of a fight that he could promote that could bring in as many subscribers as Kell, Brook and Amir, apart from, like I said, Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. But those are my thoughts. So I suppose the questions that I started with, is it too late? Is it still a big event? I don't think it's too late. I think it would have been better if they fought when they're both physically at their peak. But I think they both declined at a similar sort of rate, which will still make for an interesting fight between the two of them. So I don't think it's too late. I just think it's not in the prime time it could have been. I still feel like it's a big event and I still definitely care. I still want to see it. So yeah, put your comments below. What do you guys think about the stuff that I've said? Please feel free to share your own opinions about the fight. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe, all of that jazz. I'll catch you guys next time.